We're joined by Josh Andrus, Executive Director of Project Confederation, and we're unpacking the recent Alberta leadership election, which saw the instant premiership of Danielle Smith, because obviously Premier Jason Kenney stepped down, there was leadership, and now Danielle Smith is the Premier of Alberta. One of her main planks of her campaign, and perhaps one of the more attractive ones, was the Alberta Sovereignty Act. This is what she said she would bring in. Could you please, Josh, explain what exactly that is and what kind of practical impact that could have for Albertans? Is this just some wishful thinking? Could this actually have teeth?
Well, I think that's what we're about to find out. I think the impetus for this is let's take Bill C-69 for example. That's the Impact Assessment Act that was brought in by the Trudeau government, and I think it was 2018. What has happened in the meantime? So the Impact Assessment Act effectively means that the government's environmental department can oversee pretty much any project development, whether it's a highway over 75 kilometers in rural Alberta, or a gravel pit, or even a major energy project. What we've seen is the federal government using environmental regulations to essentially dictate to everywhere in the country, whatever you can do, you has to be approved by Ottawa. And I think that's created the impetus for the Sovereignty Act. I mean, if you look at the Alberta Court of Appeals, we had a court case earlier this year that saw the Alberta Court of Appeals rule in favor of the Alberta government, as well as 8 other provinces intervened on Alberta's behalf in that case, ruling that the Impact Assessment Act is unconstitutional. However, until the Supreme Court of Canada makes a ruling, that the federal government can still use that legislation to bring in any kind of rules that they want involving environmental really dictate to us what projects we can do, even though our courts have ruled it unconstitutional. So I think it's just to kind of fit into that area where if we have as long as we stick within the courts, it'll be constitutional. I think it will have teeth in that regards, where we are respecting Supreme Court decisions. If the Supreme Court rules that and 8 other provinces are going against the grain, and that, the Impact
Right.
Assessment Act is constitutional. Sorry, that I think that's where it will have teeth. So it's just to kind of fill the gaps where you have this, where we're waiting. It could take years for a Supreme Court ruling, and the federal government's still operating.
Which is sort of sad if you think of, especially with the climate we're in now, when we've seen Russia invading Ukraine, there's a disruption in oil and gas supply, and yet here's Alberta sitting on so much supply, but yet can't get it out. And there seems to be no federal government desire to get that going. I really feel badly for Alberta. I feel that it just seems that you're not treated so well, and you have such wonderful resources, and they could really help a lot of Canadians out, especially in the midst of rising gas prices and an inflation. So I think you commented well, saying a lot of people joined the party because they saw this as perhaps the direction to go. What is the NDP's response to something like the Alberta Sovereignty Act? The NDP, of course, was the governing party just until a few years ago when Jason Kenney took over. Maybe they'll come back in, we don't know. But what is their response to this?
Oh, I mean, it's been quite sensational. They call it crazy. They call it. They use, some of our own words against us in some cases, where we had leadership candidates and the Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, calling it a cockamamie scheme. All they're doing is taking the words out of our own mouths, that we were fighting during the leadership race, and for them, it demonstrates that they aren't really taking our relationship with Ottawa seriously. I mean, this is the Trudeau-Notley alliance that brought in the provincial carbon tax in 2015, despite not campaigning on it. This is a party that they're willing to do and say anything to mask the fact that they're just as bad as the federal government when it comes to environmental regulations and a lack of investment in the energy industry. And I think that's really what it comes down to. You have a lot of people in certain areas of the province that believe that we should leave our oil in the ground, that we shouldn't help to assist dealing with supply issues in the rest of the country, right? Or even the rest of the world. We do have an
Right.
asset that can help everybody else. We've got price issues with rising costs across the country, and we do have an asset that can help alleviate some of those pain.
And at the end of the day, I think I trust our oil extraction practices over those in perhaps the developing world, and some regimes where environmentalism, environmentalism, throw it aside, nobody cares. So I do feel that if we can do something made in Canada, we should do something made in Canada, and like you said, export it for the rest of the world. Uh, What kind of impact do you think she's going to have on the oil and gas sector? We only have 20 minutes, 20 seconds, but we can pick it up in a moment.
Yeah, I think she's going to have a big impact. I think that there's a lot of energy companies that are frustrated with the way the federal government's been treating them, and they're looking for a change in direction.